Hi, today we're going to have a look at the 2021 Leaving Cert higher level cash flow question. With all cash flows, we're given a balance sheet for this year and the previous year, and we're given some additional notes, and we're asked to prepare the abridged profit and loss and to prepare a cash flow with reconciliation statements. Those two statements are the reconciliation of operating profit to net cash inflow from operating activities, and the second one is the reconciliation of net cash flow to movement in net debt. Before I would start with any of that work, I would do some workings, okay? Because if you do the workings at the start, it'll just make it easier when you're filling it in to the question. So you can see here all of the figures in blue or yellow or green here will go into either the abridged P&L, the cash flow orders, or the reconciliation statements. So it is important that we do those workings. So my first working are to do with fixed assets. I'm going to get the cost of fixed assets, the depreciation and profit or loss on fixed assets. Sometimes in this question, you're just told fixed assets, and sometimes you're given a breakdown like we are here of land and buildings and machinery. So to start off, land and buildings, I'm going to do the cost first of all. So we need to do a note on cost of land and buildings and machinery. So the land and buildings at the end were 920, at the start were 750. So 920 at the end and 750 at the start, they have gone up by 170,000. So if there are no disposals of land and buildings, that means they would have paid 170,000 for land and buildings. But there are disposal of land and buildings in the question, and the cost of the land and buildings were disposed of for 100,000. So I'm going to add that 100,000 disposal, and that will give me the payments to acquire the tangible fixed assets. So they've gone up by 170, okay, but that includes a disposal of 100, so they must have purchased 270 or paid for 270. Machinery. It says in the question there's no disposal of machinery during the year. So the change in machinery at the end of the year was 300 and the start of the year was 240. So that must be all purchases. So the closing balance is 300, opening balance 240. So the difference is 60,000. The disposals are 0. So 60,000 plus 0 is 60,000. The next thing I need to do is a similar note, but this time it's on the depreciation of fixed assets. So again, I'm going to get my closing balance. So buildings, the closing balance for buildings was 82, the opening balance was 90. So 82,000 and 90,000. So 82 minus 90 is minus 8,000, which is unusual. But you can see that if I add my, I'm given my depreciation charge for the year, and my buildings is 20,000. So if I put in 20,000 for the depreciation charge for the year, that must mean that the disposals were 28, because minus 8 plus 28 gives me the minus 20. So that's kind of my plug figure at the end to the disposals figure, and I need that figure in a minute, so it's important. So if we want to just have a quick look at what's going on there, because that can be kind of confusing. The machinery, the buildings, last year the accumulated depreciation was 90,000. The charge for the year is 20,000. So you would expect this year to be 90 plus 20. You'd expect this figure to be 110. Okay, it's not 110, it's 82, so it's 28,000 less. So that 28,000 that's less that was taken out must be the depreciation of the buildings that were sold. The machinery is more straightforward because there are no disposals. So machinery, the accumulated depreciation of machinery at the end is 134, to start is 120. So 134,000 and 120,000. So the difference is 14,000, and because there are no disposals, that means that the 14,000 was just the depreciation charge for this year. So 14,000 depreciation charge for machinery. Now, profit and loss, because we sold no machinery, we don't have to get a profit or loss on machinery. The profit and loss on the buildings, I can see from above that the cost of the buildings that I dispose of were 100,000. The depreciation of the buildings I disposed of were 28,000. So those buildings were worth 72,000. In the question, it says that we received 90,000 for the buildings that were sold. They were sold for 90,000. So I received 90,000. So if I received 90,000 and they're only worth 72,000, I made a profit of 18,000. Okay, if you receive more, I received 90,000. So the 90,000 I received goes in there. So if you receive more than a net book value or the worth, you made a profit. If you receive less than the net book value, it would be a loss. But in this case, it's a profit. I now need to do notes on the debenture, interest, tax, dividend, and investment income. These three are kind of under the same box here because these are treated similar because these are all liabilities. So if I'm looking for opening and closing balances for those three items, I'll be looking down here in creditors less than 1 year because they're liabilities. The opening and closing balances should be there for those three. That's debenture, interest, tax, and dividend. And the opening and closing balance for investment income should be up here because investment income is an asset. So to start with debenture interest, if I look at debenture interest, the opening balance for debenture interest, and again it says interest due, but that is debenture interest due. The opening balance is 15 and the closing balance is 10. So if I go to my workings here, 15,000, 10,000. I have to work out my debenture interest charge for the year. So when we're doing this, the date is very important. So debentures have gone from 300,000 to 250,000. So they're just long-term loans have gone from 300 to 250. Now, if they were redeemed at the very start of the year, means they would have been 250 for the year. So I would get 8% of that. But because these were redeemed at the last day of the year, that means they were 300,000 for the year, and they only went to 250 the last day of the year. I'm going to get 8% of the 300,000. So that date is important. So if I go back to my workings, it's going to be 300,000 by 8% is 24,000. So at the start of the year, I owed 15,000. I owe 24,000 for this year, which is 39,000. My closing balance at the end of the year, I only owe 10. So I must have paid the difference, which is 29,000. Tax note is going to be similar. Opening balance is 34 I owed at the start and 68,400 at the end. So 34 at the start and 68,400 at the end. Now, what does it say about taxation here in the notes? It says the tax due at the end of 2019 was paid in full. So what tax was due at the end of 2019? This is 2019, 34,000 was due, so that was paid in full. So if I go back to my workings and for paid, I'm going to put in 34,000. So sometimes you might be given the income or expense. If you're given this, you should be able to work out the paid or received. If you're given the paid or received, you should be able to work out the income or expense. So to work backwards here, some figure less 68,400 gives me 34. So if I add these two figures, it will give me 102,400. And 34 plus some figure gives me 102,400. So that must be the difference, is 68,400. And that is my charge for the year. Dividends. Again, if I go down to my liabilities, there's no dividends due at the start or the end of the year. So they are both going to be zero. Opening and closing balance are zero. Now it says the dividend paid was 6 cents per share on shares held at the end of 2020. So my shares at the end of 2020 I can see are 750,000 and the dividend was 6 cents per share and they're €1 shares, so that's just 6% of 750,000. And that's paid. So 750,000 by 6% is 45,000. So again, if I work backwards, some figure less 0 gives me 45,000. Well, that must be that plus that, 45,000. And 0 plus some figure gives me 45,000, so that is 45,000. And that makes sense because if we didn't owe any dividends that started at the end of the year, we paid 45. The charge for this year must have been 45. Investment income, again, I'm going to look for my opening and closing balances here in the assets this time. So the opening is 400 and the closing is 1,000. So the opening is 400 and the closing is 1,000. Now, I can work out my investment income for the year because my investments are 40,000 and the rate of interest is 4%. So my income for the year should be 40,000 by 4%, which is 1,600. So I was owed 400 at the start of the year. I should be owed another 1,600 for this year, which is 2,000. At the end of the year, I was only owed 1,000. So I must have received the difference of 1,000. Okay, so now we have the workings done, we're going to start with a proper question. And the first thing we're going to do is the abridged profit and loss account. So for this, we have to work at the bottom, start at the bottom and work our way up. So the first two figures that go in are the profit and loss balance at the end of the year and the start of the year. So the profit and loss balance at the end of the year, if I go back to my question, is 303,200 and the start of the year was 143,400. So this is 303. $303,200 and the start of the year it's 143,400. And then the difference will give me the profit for this year, which is 159,800. Now I was going to fill in the four figures here in green because these are all coming from my notes. So that's why it was handy to have the notes done. So my first figure is going to be my dividends. And again, this is the profit and loss. So this is the charge for the year, not what's actually paid or received. So my dividends, go back to my notes here, and I'm going to take my green dividends figure. And it's going to be a minus because dividends are an expense. So the expense was 45,000. Again, taxation, I'm going to take from my notes again. So go back to my taxation, the green figure, minus 68,400. Debenture interest, again, for my notes here. And again, debenture interest is 24,000. A minus because it's an expense. And investment income is going to be income. So that's going to be a positive figure of 1,600. So that will work back up. Some figure less 45 gives me 149. So to get that, I'm just going to add the two figures. It gives me 204,800. Some figure less 68,400 gives me the 204. So again, I'm going to do the opposite. When I work back up, I'm going to add these figures to give me 273,200. Some figure plus 1,600 minus 24 grand gives me 273,200. And again, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add 24 and take away the 1,600 is 295,600. Okay, so now that's the abridged profit and loss done. I'm going to do my first reconciliation statement. So this is the reconciliation of operating profit to net cash inflow from operating activities. So my first figure here is always my operating profit, which I'm just after working out there above, 295,600. I now have to add depreciation charge for the year. Again, I'm going to get this from my workings because earlier I worked out the depreciation of land and buildings, and I'm going to add the depreciation of machinery. So 2014 depreciation charge is 34. And you always add depreciation. Depreciation is a non-cash item, so we'll always add that back, 34,000. Patents written off will have to go here. Sometimes there are no patents written off in these questions. Sometimes there are. So in this question there is. We have to include that. Where do I get my patents written off from? From the balance sheet. Last year, the patents were 81. This year, they're 72. So they've been down by 9,000. So they've been written off by 9,000. And again, that's going to go in here. And again, we're always going to add that. So depreciation and patents are always add. They're positive. Now, the next 5 things here, we need to be careful on the signs. Okay, these can be either pluses or minuses. The first thing, profit on disposal. So obviously there can be a profit or a loss on disposal. In this question, there's a profit, and I've done the workings for that. There was a profit of 18,000. Okay, and with this, it's going to be the opposite of what you think. So the quick way to remember this is the opposite of what you think. So if it's a profit, it's going to be a minus figure. If it's a loss, it's going to be a positive figure. Okay, so this is a profit, so it's going to be a minus. And again, I'm just going to take it from my workings, 18,000. Okay, and the next thing we're going to look at is the bad debt provision. So the bad debt provision has gone from 2,000 to 5,400. It's increased by 3,000. And with the bad debt provision, it's the same as what you think, meaning if it's an increase, it is a plus. If it's a decrease, it is a minus. So it's an increase of 3,400. And it's the same as what you think. It's a plus 3,400. Stock and debtors, these are both the same. These are the opposite of what you think. They're the same because they're both assets. Stock and debtors are both assets. They're the same as what you think. And creditors is a stock and debtors are both assets. They're the same as you think. Stock and debtors are both assets. They're the opposite of what you think. And creditors is a liability. That's the same as you think. So these two are the same as each other because they're both assets. And then that's liability, so it's different. So if you remember, these two are both the opposite of what you think. And this one is the same. What do I mean by that? So if I look at stock has gone from 165 to 145, so it's decreased by 20,000. And if it's decreased by 20,000, and it's the opposite of what you think, it's going to be a positive 20,000. Debtors, again, debtors have gone from 200 to 270. They've increased by 70,000. So if they've increased by 70,000 and they're at the opposite of what you think, so you think an increase would be a positive, but if it's the opposite of what you think, it's going to be minus 70,000. And then creditors is the same as you think, meaning if it's an increase, it's a plus, a decrease, it's a minus. So creditors have gone from 99 to 123. They've increased by 24,000. So they've increased, and it's the same as you think. It's a positive 24,000. So now we just total these down, and they come to 298,000. And that is my net cash inflow from operating activities. Because it's a positive figure, it's an inflow. If it was a negative figure, it would be an outflow. Just to kind of explain some of these quickly, I don't want to get too bogged down in it. The easy way to remember it is the rules, but just to think about it, if there's a decrease in stock, okay, it means we sold more stock, so our money is going up by 20 grand. If there's an increase in debtors, means people that owe us money have increased, so we've got less money, so that's gone down by 70 grand. And an increase in creditors are people we owe money to. If there's an increase, means we owe them more money, so we pay them less money, so we're kind of up 24 grand. But I think in an exam situation, just if you can remember these rules, it'll speed up and make it easier for you. Now to do our cash flow statement. So for the cash flow statement, there are 7 headings. You have to total it after 5 headings, a subtotal, and then add the next 2 headings to give you your total at the end. The first heading is very straightforward. It's just a final figure from the previous part, net cash inflow from operating activities. Under return on investment and servicing of finance is any income we received or any interest we received or any interest paid. So we received investment income, and this isn't the charge, this is actually the amount we received or paid. So we received investment income, which is good. That's going to be a positive figure. And I'm going to take that from my workings here, the yellow figures, because it's what we actually received is 1,000. It's a positive. And the debenture interest paid is going to be a minus figure. And again, I'm taking that from my workings. We paid 29,000. So they come to minus 28,000. Taxation is very simple. You just put in tax paid, and again, that's just coming from my working. So again, you can see how important these workings are. It's 34,000, and it's a minus because it's paid. Capital expenditure and financial investment. What goes here is any investments bought or sold, or any fixed assets that were bought or sold. In this question, there were no investments bought or sold, and a lot of questions there are, but ours haven't changed. There's still 40,000, so there's no investments bought or sold. So I just have to look at my fixed assets. So the receipts from the sale of the buildings. I was told in the question that we received 90,000. They were sold for 90,000. So that's coming from the question here, 90,000. And for my workings, I can see what I paid to acquire land and buildings. I paid 270,000 to acquire land and buildings. And again, that should be a minus figure. So the receipt is a plus figure because there's money in. The payment is a minus figure, money out, cash out. And again, the payments to acquire machinery, 60,000, will be a negative. So they come to minus 240,000. Equity dividends paid, this is very straightforward again. It's just the dividends that were paid during the year. And again, that's coming from my workings down here below. And it's the yellow figure. I paid 45,000. So now after the first 5 headings, I am going to total this, or subtotal it. Comes to minus 49,000. And that's net cash outflow because it's a negative figure before liquid resources and financing. And liquid resources and financing are just heading 6 and 7. So what goes under management of liquid resources is just purchase of government securities, and that is going to be a negative figure because we paid money to purchase them. So government securities has gone from 20 to 60, which is 40,000. So that is going to be a minus 40,000 because we paid 40,000 to purchase government securities. Under financing, are any increase or decrease in debentures, or share capital, or share premium? So I'm going to start off with the share capital and share premium. They're more straightforward. So the share capital has gone from 600 to 750, which is 150,000. And the company has issued more shares. So they've got 150,000 for those shares. So that's a positive figure. Same the share premium. The premium has gone from 120 to 150. That's just an additional charge on the shares. They've gone up 30,000. So again, that's 30,000 more for the company. With the debentures, we need to be careful. Sometimes the debentures or loans will go up. Sometimes the debentures or loans will go down. If we repay a debenture, it's going to be a negative figure. Okay, so basically, if you want to think about it, if the debenture goes down, it's going to be a minus figure. If it goes up, it's going to be a plus figure. Because if you repay a debenture, okay, the debenture's gone down, meaning, so you see here that it's gone from 300,000 to 250,000. So my loan's gone down 50 grand, which is good, but we have spent 50 grand to repay that loan, so my cash will have gone down by 50,000. So I'm just going to subtotal these for heading 7. They come to 130,000, and now I'm going to add my subtotal after 5, include heading 6 and 7, and it comes to 41,000. So it's a positive 41,000, so that means there was an increase in cash of 41,000. Now I'm just going to do a quick check to see if that figure is correct down below. That's a nice thing about this question. You can check if your answer is correct. So I'm just going to take my bank or cash figures here. Again, if they are assets, they'll go in as a plus. If it's a bank overdraft, it was a minus figure. This is fairly straightforward in this question because there's no cash in the bank or assets both years. So this year I have a bank of 68, and last year was 27. So 68,000 this year, 27,000 last year. So the increase is 41,000, and that 41,000 ties back into my 41,000 here, so I know it's correct. Now the last thing we have to do, or the last calculation or workings, is there a second reconciliation. It's the reconciliation of net cash flow to movement in net debt. So the first figure that's going to go here is my increase in cash in the period. If it was a decrease, I'd call it a decrease and it'll be a minus. Then I'm going to put in the cash used to purchase liquid resources. So this is just going to be the opposite of what it is in the cash flow. So in the cash flow, it's always going to be a minus. So it's going to be a plus here. Okay, because nearly we always purchase government securities, you wouldn't sell them. So if it's a minus 40,000 here in the cash flow, it's going to be a positive 40,000 here. With the debentures, again, it's going to be opposite of the cash flow. So if it's a minus figure, if the debentures are minus here in the cash flow in heading 7, it's going to be a plus here. If it was a plus here in the cash flow, it would be a minus. So there are the simple, quick rules to remember those. Now I'm just going to total these down, and they come to 131,000 is the change in net debt. Now I'm going to get my net debt at the start. Okay, so how do I work out net debt? Well, I suppose it's just your kind of positive or negative bank figures. So I'm going to include my cash, bank, government securities, and my loan. So there's no cash here. Bank is an asset of 27, be a plus 27. Government securities is an asset of 20, a plus 20. There's no bank overdraft here. So my only liability is my long-term loan of 300. So it's going to be 27 plus 20 minus 300. So 27 plus 20 minus 300,000 comes to minus 253,000. And I'm going to add these down. So 131 minus 253 is minus 122,000. And that should tie back in to my net debt at the end of the year. So if we look at my net debt at the end of the year, my bank is an asset, and so are government securities. They're still both assets. So they come to 128,000. And my liability or my loan is 250,000. So 128 minus 250 is minus 122, and that ties back in. So I know I'm correct. So that's all our calculations done on the cash flow question for the 2021 Leaving Cert. So hopefully that was some help. If it was, please subscribe and like the YouTube channel. Thank you.